Sometimes you just need to turn off the distractions, get to work, and find the universal truths that affect us all and that govern our universe. This is a good place to do that. Mark Foltz and Kat Hobson will try to help with that a bit by bringing fantastic guests. Let's see what's happening tonight.
Welcome to Universal. Oh, sorry. Welcome to Universal Truths with Mark Foltz, and I'm coming to you from WBHM-DB in Birmingham, Alabama, and I am located in beautiful Pensacola, Florida, and I am, of course, a psychic, and I work at, if anyone interested in finding me, I work at Live and Let Live Metaphysical Store in Pensacola on Softly Field Road, 4622, I think, Softly Field Road. And I'm kind of an all-around person. I have so many different interests and things like that there are hardly any topics that I can't jump in on. So tonight I hope we're going to have a fun time, but I am going to warn you, Mercury in retrograde, which has been terrible this time, goes direct or gets over tomorrow. And I couldn't be happier for Mercury to go direct. Because anyone who knows what a Mercury in retrograde is, it will tear you the new one. Now, let me see. What I'm going to be talking about tonight is the masculine fear of the feminine. Now, we have so many issues going on that are anti-feminine, which against the woman, but not just the woman in society. It's against even those who have feminine energy, which would be gay and lesbian and trans people and bi people. And, every year the list gets a little longer. So I'm going to try and look at that a little bit because I had a couple of people trigger me on some of that, and I don't know. I'm just going to talk about it. I'm going to sling it out there, and I'm going to bring it to you from a different perspective because I'm a gay male in a society that is afraid of gay people and strong women and trans people and everything. So we're going to kind of talk about that. And there will be a little bit of history in some of this, but mostly I'm going to talk about, now. because right now we're dealing with it, not just the history of it. We're dealing with people, women. There always is somebody trying to take away the rights of someone, whether it be women, whether it be the people, the minorities. Besides, the gay, the straight, the lesbian, the trans, and other people, other minorities, and they just, it's like it's human nature for people to find someone to use as a scapegoat to put their angst on. And it usually tends to be the more vulnerable people. And we're also going to talk children, because children are so unprotected. And so many things are happening in the world right now that we aren't doing anything about. But we need to start to be conscious. We need to be more conscious about our children. We need to be conscious of how we're raising them. We need to be conscious about how we as individuals lead our lives and how we want our children to see us and understand, that you can be a strong person. It's okay to be yourself. It's okay to burn a path of your own, not follow what everyone else is saying, which is what every single person should be doing. We should not ever have to feel like to make ourselves bigger, we have to make someone else smaller. That's a terrible, terrible thing. And in metaphysics, most metaphysical people I know have a different idea of that. I came from a very, very weird, a very strict background in a way, as far as religion, where I was a very good little Christian. I was a very good little, I was a Bible thumper when I was little, because I had to find something to hold on to. And because I came from a very bad background, I came from the aspect of the unwanted child. And so, and also, I'll cover the reason why I'm going to go into that, because I was very fragile, and I was a little tow-headed, chitlet teeth, squeaky voice little nerd. And because I was gentle and feminine as a 3 and 4 year old kid, I started getting abused because that was what they hated. They hated that, the people I came from. And so I understand from my perspective of why they hate the feminine. But we're going to try and look at why are men so afraid of women in particular, and strong women in particular. We'll start that off, really, because I think it's a little fascinating, and we need to see in our history, now some of our history, what we are in is a patriarchal society, but in the old days, there were more matriarchal societies, and they worked pretty well. And history is written by the winners, and the winners were the men. And when they wanted to take over and replace a belief system, they would go in and take those practitioners and kill all of them, or kill a number of them and then scare the rest of them into changing to their belief systems. It wasn't, oh, wouldn't you like to think the way we do? They would go in and kill them. And the matriarchal societies, we don't have very many of them to look at because they have the history of that is being erased. And that is because people do not want you to think that there were societies where there were strong women who actually did a good job. And in our lifetimes, in our history, we can look at, people like Cleopatra. We can look at people like Queen Elizabeth I, Queen Elizabeth II. And even though I don't agree with what the Queen of England, what they all stand for, I hate to see, because she's like 90 years old. When she goes, it's the last real remnant of a queen, of a matriarch like that we will see in our lifetimes. And she's a figurehead, but in other days, in the older ones, they weren't figureheads. They were powerful women, making decisions, saying those people are bad for babies, kill them. If you don't think a woman can direct war, you don't know women. Don't piss them off, and don't hurt their children. Don't hurt children. Women would be more pro-child, and that is something we really need in this world, because our children everywhere are suffering and being killed and being sold and bought like cattle, and the patriarchal society doesn't really care. Women would, if women were in a position of power. I think women would go after that. The men don't seem to be doing so much. And that's a question for you to ask those people. Why aren't you're the leader of this country or that country, why are you allowing that? Why are you allowing that? And they should be ashamed. We should all be ashamed that there are children and people who are in minorities that are being abused or enslaved or put upon in a way where, every person is important. And in metaphysics, I believe every person is important. Your life is very important. It doesn't matter if you're on the street, if you succeed, if you fail. The universe wants your life. And maybe it's getting something out of the life that some of these people are leading that are filled with just horror or discrimination or being put in the back seat. But, we need to, as a culture, at some point say no to these people. Chase, to stop some of the things that are going on. Look at everyone as human. And especially in this country, if you live in this country, you have rights. You should have rights. You should have the rights of everybody else has. And that doesn't always seem to be the case. It's always about who can we take the rights from? Who can we chip at? And women in particular are very vulnerable. And if we think about it, the politicians and the stuff, if the Supreme Court really wanted to, we could have this, equal pay, for women. If you're doing the same job, you should be paid for it. Why has that never been done? Because they have to be a chunk lower than the male. And we're going to kind of discuss that as we go in, because I come from a era, because I'm 60, and in the 60s, in the family I came from, it might as well been the 50s. And they just had these very archaic ideas about women. And, 20 years before I was born, we had the Second World War. Women all of a sudden got to go to work and be the breadwinners and get out into the world and do things. And when the men came back from war, they said, all right, dears, that's enough. Go back to being the little homemaker. You won't be able to work. You need to raise our children, and you need to be submissive to me. And that's just how it's going to be. And if you don't do that, then you're going to look like a bad woman. And that's the society I came from. And I think we'll cover some of that too, because what the women thought from my mother's era was very strange to me at the time. You know, a lot of women fall for that and liked having the in control male and teaching their, being basically everyone's slave to clean and cook, and not, the children are not raised to respect women. And in my family, the women did not respect themselves. They just were, their purpose in life was to be raised, to get a man, have a family, die, live and die. And so, we're going to come back and go to that. I don't know if a lot of people are having that problem now, but we will come back and discuss why we have to start looking at and overcoming our issues with the men in charge being afraid of women, and how to teach our children to be more respectful of women, and how in metaphysics we respect the feminine and have it equal. So I think it's time for a break. So we will be right back. And all of you out there in the dark, don't touch that dial.
Warning, the following message does not necessarily reflect the views of WBHM-DB or its hosts, guests, listeners, or of any functioning adult in general. In fact, Frank should probably seek professional help. Listener discretion is advised.
Hi there, Frank Lee here. I thought that I would spend a few moments telling you about the positivity from the network here. The overall message of para-unity and happiness, and how everyone here wants to get along with everyone out there, and how everything is just wonderful. Wait, Cat's not looking. Okay, I've got something to really tell you.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you what's really going on. Honestly, all that being nice and positive crap was kind of hurting my soul, as dark as it is. So, what's really happening? Well, you see it all the time. Everybody and their brother out there has a paranormal team because they watched a couple of episodes of Ghost Hunters or some crap like that. So they go and they spend half their mortgage payment on tools and things that light up that they don't understand. And then the next logical step, after buying matching black t-shirts and posing like 90s rappers for their Facebook page,
welcome back to Universal Truth. And this is Mark Folks from WBHM-DB in Birmingham, Alabama. And all of you out there that are just starting to come in, we're going to re-say this again. Mercury in retrograde goes direct tomorrow. Man. And if people don't know what a Mercury in retrograde is, honey, I have that. Mercury is one of my planets, and if you, this time, because of the eclipse and all of that, it was pretty damn that.
I bring you the best.
So if you don't know what a Mercury retrograde is, look it up. The universe will make you a tan puppet. It will stick its hand right up your skirt and let you know who's in charge. Now,
and you're going to get the best information.
We are talking about the masculine sphere of the feminine. So let's kind of look at historical stuff and see if I can make sense for you out of why I'm wanting to talk all this, because I want to talk about the modern problems we're having where men are making decisions for women in their health wise, and also the fact that they are afraid of feminine genders, like gay or lesbian or trans, and those people, of which I'm a part of, why they try to push them down, take their rights away, and also cover some of the current bias against feminine males that is going on. So we're going to cover some of this. Let's see if we can come up with a good idea of why are men scared of women. Now, when I went to the break, I was talking about, from my point of view, from being raised in the 60s, which in my home, it was really like the 50s. And my mother had 6 sisters and la, 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 la. All of them were raised that their only purpose in life was to get married and have children and live with their husband, take care of their husband's needs, and then die, And actually, they were not respected in my mother's family or my father's family. They weren't expected or allowed to be themselves, but the women bought into the mentality that they were submissive, they should be submissive. If they weren't submissive to the male, they were bad women. And but because they were unhappy, they, everything was about looking correct to people outside of the family. If you went out, they wanted they wanted it to look like the 1950s, wholesome little family, happy little family, good-looking kids, good-looking wife, which actually my father was 6'4" and looked like Boris Karloff. He was pretty scary looking. But my mother liked him because he was overly testosterone-filled, take my word for it. And he got her. She was a beautiful girl. She was very pretty. Her whole family were pretty girls and pretty men, but they were all very strange, that they all had been raised to believe that the woman had a purpose in the world, and that was it, and you didn't look outside of that. To do that made you a bad person. But then behind the scenes, they resented being treated the way they were treated. And in our case, they took that out on the children because they felt like they owed the children. So, but my father was very, very machismo, and my mother was working. They met at the same place when they're working. He said, once we get married, you're not going to have a job. You're going to be raising kids. And she did that, but she resented it. She ended up resenting it because it was a trap where we came from. And I learned a lot by watching her and her sisters, how they resented so many things, but they would take things out on other people behind the scenes in a very passive-aggressive way. Instead of going, standing up for their rights or standing up for their things, they would wait and then I had several aunts that were very vicious to their husbands and would beat their husbands, kind of thing. Even though they were acting like submissive wives to the world. But then throwing together that I was very Christian. My mother was a Christian. We went to church, and I globbed onto Christianity because as a little boy, being in a very abusive household, I had to find something. So I found faith as my raft to hold on to. But then you would go to, well, I'll get back into that. When I was born, they wanted a girl. They had 2 boys and a girl already. Now, when I was born and I was not a girl, they wrote horrible things about me in my baby book, which I still have. My mother pitched a fit, wouldn't hold me, didn't want to have anything to do with me. And they did not want to have anything to do with me since I wasn't a girl. It had nothing to do with me. It just is, they had that in their head. So when I was little, and then by the time I was 3, I was a very sweet little boy. I was a good little boy, but I was a little feminine at 3 and 4 years old. So my aunt started going, well, he's going to be homosexual. They used other words, but I'm not going to use that. And so they started harassing my mother. So then my mother and my father, to them, it's the worst thing in the world to have a feminine boy. So from the age of 4 on, I was abused for being a little fragile, sweet kid, which happens so often. My father just hated gentle boys. He really would say, things like to me, I hate your face. I want to blow your face off. Because they thought I was embarrassing because I wasn't a boy like my brothers. My brothers were very boy-centric. They were doing what it is. But I found out from a very early age what they thought about little feminine boys. And I would get very abused. And so, they were trying to toughen me up. I have Marfan's, which my arms would come out of place. And every time it would happen. From the time I was 4 to 6, every other month I had to go to the doctor, have my arm reset. And it was terrifying pain, horrible. Little kids cry when things like that happen. And my father got an idea. And since he wanted to man me up because I was too feminine. So the next time my arm came out of place when I was 6, it's right before, I think it was right before I started first grade. And I came in the house screaming because my arm was out of place. It was terrible. So he put me on the couch, put his knee on my chest, pulled my arm and shoulder out of place. And then, while I was in shock, told me, said, you're never going back to the doctor for this. Anytime your arm comes out of place, I'm going to do this. And you're not, so shut up and man up. And so the next time my arm came out of place, see, if I cried or showed any emotion in front of these people, instead of being parents and making sure I was okay, I would get punished for making them feel uncomfortable because I was crying and in pain. So the next time my arm came out of place, I didn't say a word. I didn't cry. I went to school with my arm out of place. And I didn't go back to a doctor until I was in my 20s, which was all the damage was all done. But they did that because the aunts and stuff were going, well, he's going to be gay. So my father and my mother both would say, well, that will make you tough. That will make you butch up. And so shut up and leave me alone, you know. And so I found very early, you know, because of the fact that I was feminine as a child. I was really more like a transgender child. I just had a different aspect. But in metaphysics, I believe that's because, you know, when people are reincarnated, sometimes the male or the female spirit gets into a body of the opposite sex. That can cause that. Sometimes I believe it can come from metaphysics. And also I know that I'm the reincarnation of two other unwanted babies, and I immediately was an unwanted baby. So the other two did not make it. So I had to make it through that. And it was horrifying. And as a child, all I wanted to be was have my parents and have them be my parents and to protect me and stand up for me. I never had any of that. I never had protection. And as a matter of fact, the more that they could torture me, the better, because they would feel like, well, he's gay, so he's going to be gay. So they just jumped on me. And that happens to a lot of people in society. And but let's go back. But they were afraid of a feminine child. We're talking about a 4 and 5 and 6-year-old. They were afraid of me and embarrassed by what that represented. So they had to crush that, and they did quite often. So let's kind of go back into the past and look at why are men scared of the feminine issues in men and women, and why we have to maybe we should start, you know, looking at it a little differently. And again, history is written by the winners. So if you try to look at anything about matriarchal stuff, they'll say, well, you know, intellectuals try to say it's there, but we really don't think it is because it's being eradicated. Anything that was matriarchal is being poo-pooed on because the men only want to be the only things that have ever been. So what are men afraid of? They're afraid of being dominated by a strong woman or controlled. And maybe that comes from mommy issues because the mommy, when they're little, my mother spoiled my two brothers to death. And they both ended up not respecting her. My father was very violent, and they respected that. But my mother had the position of, I'm your slave, I'm here to cook for you, clean for you, you don't have to pay me respect. And so they didn't respect her. And since I was a feminine child, I always stood up for my mother. I always stood up for women because, you know, here we are. The women do the most work about the children. You know, I mean, the man does his job, but, you know, the woman carries the baby for 8 months. You know, we share their blood, their air, their food, and we're a large portion of our mother. And it actually gets me a little upset when, like, with my family would do, like, family reunions and family histories, they act like women, oh, yeah. No, they wouldn't cover the women, but every man in the book, they have to just have a big write-up about it. It's all about the dude. And the women who had very interesting backgrounds, everything, oh, she was a good mother. That was it. The man, the children take the man's name. If their children marry, the wife has to take the man's name. It's all about the male. And the women are just not, they're just not viewed as important. And we don't view our women and children as important and as respectful. And I think it would do men a great deal of good if they could ever experience pregnancy and what that is. They just tra-la-la-la-la through the world, and they have none of that. But when one time my father explained to me years ago scientifically what he thought caused gay people, and he said that the embryo is female in the beginning. All embryos are female. And then at some point, we get another chromosome and it becomes a male. Or I've known hermaphrodites. I've known transgender people, but I've known a hermaphrodite who was born with all of it. And the father at that time, in my era, when that would happen, they would just choose the sex of the child right then. And if it was the wrong choice, their life was ruined. So we're all female in the beginning. So that means we have all the mechanism of the female. Somewhere in there, we have the mechanism for nurturing and having their chemical issues as well as our male issues, too much testosterone, too much estrogen. And so in our culture, of course, they try to act like anyone who's different, it's a choice, which is not a choice. People are born who they are. This is my opinion, because I was born who I am. I could not change who I am one iota. And believe me, I was tortured all my life for it when I was young. And now it's my strength. But when I was young, it was not my strength. And so, I see it nowadays. I see the disparaging kind of way they treat women and little girls and little boys. And so, but it's always kind of been that way in history. If we go back, really the oldest history we have, the records, is the Sumerian records. And the Sumerian people were going, well, these other people came and gave us all this stuff, which were what we hear of now as the Anunnaki. But that's from their records. And those Anunnaki, old people, they had several women that they talked about very highly. That one of the scientists they had, I think her name was Tiamat, and now Tiamat is kind of like a demonized creature, but she wasn't that at that time. She was held in deep respect. Going back into Christian history, some of the Christian stories are taken, as far as I can tell, from some of the Sumerian stories, because in the Sumerian things, the Anunnaki created Adapa, which in the Bible is Adam and Eve. And each when you start to look back, then you go, well, that's kind of interesting. But Christianity, when it came in, a lot of religions were still holding women in high regard and also accommodated gay people. And then it started to creep in, where they started to demonize all the women. And in the Bible, they do that. They demonize Mother Mary a little bit. She was an unwed mother. They looked down on those kind of things. Mary Magdalene, they said, was a whore, or she wasn't. In metaphysics, we were taught that Mary Magdalene actually was a priestess in her own right from her own people. And there are other stories that she married Jesus and they had children, but that's another story. But they, looked down on Mary Magdalene. They looked down on Eve. So let's start kind of there. Let's go back that far. Why were they demonizing Eve a little bit? That she seduced Adam and made him fall from grace. And when I just think that's a little bit of horse manure, or a lot of horse manure. So let's look back. There's another female that they demonized, which was Lilith. The Anunnaki who came here, this is the story, as far as I can tell it. They came here looking for their metals and stuff like that. The people they brought as slaves didn't want to work here. The gravity was too bad. They just didn't want to do it. So they took what was here. There was something here, and mixed it with DNA that they chose, and they created Adam, or Adapa. And people really liked him so much that they ordered more of those, and they were hybrid creations. And at some point, they felt like Adapa needed a partner. So they had an Anunnaki named Lilith, who became his partner, and she didn't like him. She was bored with him. So she said, screw this, and I'm going to go do what I want to do. So they demonized her for not accepting Adapa, or Adam. So Adam's first wife was one she was a wild woman. She wasn't going to take it. The next person, they thought, well, he's a hybrid. So how do we create a partner for him? So they took a rib and cloned Eve. So when I was young, I'd go, why do they have to use a rib to make a partner for Adam if God can just go poof, poof, and there's plants and animals and things like that? Why can't they just poof up another woman? And they had to take a rib because they took genetic material, and they created a hybrid partner, a clone. And later on, one of the Anunnaki scientists, whether he's being good or bad, he tinkered with them until they could reproduce. Now, this is all my opinion and what I've been reading. So when I was young, but it's pretty much, that's what I could tell. And when they became able to reproduce, that's when they were released from the greenhouse chores, because they could reproduce. And once you reproduce, you can't control people because it's out of your hands. You can't control it. And so they had made a boo-boo doing that, because they really were just supposed to be making workers. They weren't supposed to be making humankind to be able to go out there. So we're going to come back to this. We have to take a break, but I will come back to this. So all of you out there in the dark, don't touch that dial. We'll be right back.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... nope.
That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experienced Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Welcome back to Universal Truths with Mark Fultz, coming to you from WBHM-DB in Birmingham, Alabama. Now, I'm a little Southern boy, and I'm sitting here trying to tell you all of this stuff about the masculine fear of the feminine. So I have to go by what I was raised on, which in the church I was raised in, you know, everything was, women were always kind of a step or two down from whatever the man was. The God is man, a man. Mother Mary and Mary Magdalene and Eve and Lilith, you know, they were all kind of soiled or something. There was something demonized about them. And they didn't have a good message about women. They had a great message about men, but not so hot on the women's issue. So I grew up as a strange child. I was always worried about how my mother was being treated and how she even saw herself. And it just did not make sense to me. And then when we would go to church, here I was as a little Christian, you know, going to church, praying to, I didn't want to be different from anybody. I wanted to meld in. I wanted to be accepted. I wanted to have a decent life. And that just was in the cards for me. But I went to church, and my spirituality was a good raft for me. But when I would go to church, and then they would talk about, and here we're going into the fear of the feminine male, the gays. Gay people, they would just act like, well, gay people are less than human, less than animal. They can't be, a murderer can be saved, but a gay person can't. And so we're going to kind of go back into why is Christianity a little bit, or other religions? It's not just Christianity. I'm not picking at Christianity. I'm telling you from my own experience what it's like. But there are so many other religions that look down on gay people. And then there are some religions that hold them in some kind of regard. So, but they definitely aren't American. So let's kind of do this. In our culture, now the culture that what I came from, too, in my mother's family, my father's family, and the people I was around, boys had worth. Girls were like a bargaining chip, or they were just meant to get married, have babies. Men were meant to get out there and carry the world and be the hero and do whatever. And the women weren't. And if the husband makes a name for himself, great, but the woman isn't supposed to. And when I was little, my sister, who was 18 months older than me, when I was little, they were still making trousseaux in the 60s and 70s, might as well have been in the 50s. If you were a little girl at 10 years old, let's put together a cedar chest and all these things you're going to need as a mother and as a wife. And they don't really teach them about being a wife. They just say, you just have to get ready to do this. This is what you're made for. And boys weren't treated like that. My brothers were spoiled rotten, thrown out there, didn't know how to be a father. And it took them, they just were spoiled. So, and a lot of guys in this culture are spoiled. They don't know how to treat women. They don't know how to treat their children. My father thought children were his belongings, and if he wanted to abuse them, he could abuse them. And it's just crazy how, why they look down on little girls. Like in China, they kill a lot of the little baby girls. Well, then they have a problem because now they don't have enough women for the men. And to fix that problem, because you have to be married, whether you want to be or not. And if you're a single male or single female and you die in China, in the older parts, they still have ghost marriages where they will have a bidding war. If someone's daughter who's unmarried dies, they have a bidding war. They will have a bidding war at the hospital for that woman's corpse and spirit so they can marry it to their dead son who wasn't married. He might have been gay, he might have been this, whatever, but they still, and there's a black market to get dead women's bodies, and they have a ceremony, and they will marry the spirits against their will. They don't even know who these people are, but they'll marry the male spirit to the female spirit. And it's a real thing. It's a ghost marriage. And, and people don't respect their children. There was in China, I remember reading this years and years ago. They act like it's an urban legend, but I suspect it was real, where they had a famine. So the people who were desperate and didn't have money, didn't have food, they would sell their children to the butcher. And the butcher would butcher the children and sell them as a specialty out of their shops to people who would pay. And that's how much they thought of their children. They would try to do the female first, but if they had to, they'd sell the boys. It's in Afghanistan. The I watched a thing not too long ago where the people who are suffering, they're poor and they're desperate, so they're selling their 6 and 7 and 8 and 9-year-old girls to these old geezers. There was one guy, he had borrowed money and he couldn't pay the guy back, and the guy says, "I'll take your daughter." And one of the girls said, "I'll kill myself." And they showed them taking a 9-year-old, and this man came and took her by the hand, was dragging her off. The mother got on the other side to help him drag her off, and the little girl was panicking. And if they're selling the girls, they're selling the boys as well. You know, but little girls just don't have a chance in other parts of the world. And here, we see so much of, or I see so much of children being killed every day by parents who don't want them, don't need them, or they're so abused and so picked on because they may be trans, they may be gay, they may be just a girl, and being so bullied. And I can't imagine in these days with what's going on with the electronics. They bully them so hard, they kill themselves. And the people say, "Go kill yourself." And there's no repercussion. And there's nobody protecting these children. And if I had a child and somebody was pulling that crap with me or my children, I would unhinge my jaws and I would swallow the school. They would dread seeing me come through the door. And I don't see why that's not happening with these. And then children are being abused, and reported and abused, and nothing done. And then they're horribly murdered. Big surprise. Big surprise. You know, we want to think of ourselves as fine, outstanding people. But when we allow these things to happen, what are we? What are we as people? We're not protecting our children. We're not protecting our women. We're not protecting the minorities that need assistance, that other people feel the need to take away any rights they have and feel like they can. And actually they can. They're doing it. And in the second part of this hour, we will be talking a little bit about that. But in metaphysics, in my metaphysical training, we learned the respect of the feminine. And we have a male and a female aspect that we look at, that we talk to, that we call from. It's the same energy. It's just that you as people, we have certain things. We only have to come from our experience, so we know male and feminine. But if you have too much male, you have too much testosterone, hence war, abuse. If you have feminine, you can have nurturing. You can have love. And in metaphysics, we have a lot of love in our goddess aspects. And we try to teach ourselves to have more respect for the male and the feminine, but the male has to respect the female. And in our other religions, we have to start doing that. You have to start doing that. You can't, we have to retrain our mothers not to put up with crap, to find their strength, to teach their children you can be a strong woman. You can be a strong person. You just have to be yourself. You need to have a strong father and a strong mother. You don't need to have a strong, overbearing father and a submissive mother who goes, whatever he wants, that's what goes, whether it's good or bad. Sometimes it's bad. So, we need to find a little bit of goddess even in the God aspect. And we'll get back to that. We're going to go to our break, but we'll be right back. So to all of you out there in the dark, don't touch that dial.
Live from NPR News, I'm Dale Willman. President Biden will speak to the nation tonight about the amount of gun violence occurring in the U.S. In his talk at 7:30 Eastern Time, he's expected to urge Congress to pass legislation in response to recent mass shootings, including those in Uvalde, Texas, and Buffalo, New York. In Tulsa, Oklahoma, police say the man who shot 4 people, then himself at a hospital building yesterday, was a disgruntled patient of one of his victims. Chris Polanski of member station KWGS reports.
Tulsa Police Chief Wendell Franklin said the shooter, 45-year-old Michael Lewis, was targeting a surgeon who recently operated on his back. That surgeon, another doctor, a receptionist, and a patient were all killed. Franklin says Lewis bought the semi-automatic handgun and AR-15-style rifle he used in the killings on Sunday and just before the shooting yesterday, respectively.
The information that we have at the current time is that they were legally purchased firearms. One purchased an hour and some change before the actual shooting event took place, and the other purchased 3 days before the shooting took place.
Franklin said the shooter took his own life as officers approached. For NPR News, I'm Chris Polanski in Tulsa.
Peyton Gendron pleaded not guilty today in a Buffalo court to 25 charges stemming from a shooting there last month that left 10 people dead inside a supermarket on that city's east side. Officials say the 18-year-old is a self-avowed white supremacist who drove across the state of New York to target a store in a black neighborhood. All of the people killed in the shooting were black. 3 other people were injured. Ohio Governor Mike DeWine says he will sign a bill that permits school districts to arm employees. The Republican-backed measure aims to undo a state Supreme Court ruling last year that said under current law, armed school workers would need hundreds of hours of training. The new legislation would require 24 hours of initial training in order to carry a gun. The White House is laying out the federal government's plans to make the first COVID-19 vaccine available for very young children. NPR's Rob Stein has our story.
The Food and Drug Administration could authorize the first vaccine for children younger than 5 soon after an agency meeting on June 15th. So Dr. Ashish Jha, the White House COVID-19 response coordinator, says the first 10 million doses could start arriving at doctors' offices as soon as the following weekend, with the first vaccinations starting right after the Juneteenth federal holiday.
We expect that vaccinations will begin in earnest as early as Tuesday, June 21st, and really roll on throughout that week.
Enabling every parent who wants to vaccinate their babies, toddlers, and other children younger than 5 to get appointments within weeks. While many parents have been frustrated by the delay in getting a vaccine for children younger than 5, it remains unclear how much of a demand there will be. Rob Stein, NPR News.
Wall Street closed sharply higher today. The Dow was up 435 points. You're listening to NPR News. Gospel singer Deborah McCrary has died. She was part of the McCrary Sisters, a group that's been prominent in Americana and gospel music. Emily Siner from member station WPLN reports.
Deborah and her siblings learned to sing in part by sitting in with their father as he rehearsed with the legendary gospel group the Fairfield Four. When that practice was over, the children would try to recreate the harmonies. But it wasn't until about a decade ago that Deborah and her 3 sisters decided to join forces as a quartet. When they did, they quickly garnered critical acclaim for songs that cross genres, from gospel to roots to R&B. A debilitating stroke nearly ended Deborah's career in 2013. She later wrote a song called Let It Go about moving past the challenge. Another stroke in recent weeks led to her death. She was 67 years old. For NPR News, I'm Emily Siner in Nashville.
An appeals court in New York has upheld the conviction of movie mogul Harvey Weinstein on rape charges 2 years ago. He received a 23-year prison sentence following his trial. The court rejected claims that his trial was prejudiced by a judge who allowed women to testify about allegations that weren't part of the criminal case. Medicare and Social Security are expected to stay solvent a little longer. The program's annual trustees report says Social Security will remain solvent now until 2034 without any intervention. Medicare's inpatient hospital care, meanwhile, will be okay until 2028. The reprieve is due to a better-than-expected economic recovery from the pandemic. I'm Dale Willman, NPR News.
We live in a world, a country, and a moment in time where there's so much important news, and it is constantly changing. That's why Up First is here for you. It's NPR's daily morning news podcast. In about 10 minutes, you can start your day informed. Listen to Up First on the NPR One app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 5 minutes after the hour.
Welcome back to Universal Truths with Mark Fultz, and I'm coming to you from WBHM-DB in Birmingham, Alabama. And I am talking tonight about the masculine fear of the feminine, which women in particular, but also other people with feminine energy, which represents gay people, lesbians, transgender, bisexual, queer. And so I'm going to try. There's so much to think about. I'm going to try to cram it all in here. So bear with me. But I was talking about the fear of the woman. And when I was being raised up, my mother, the women that I was around, bought into the 1950s, be the submissive housewife, don't have an opinion of your own, defer to the male, and raise your children, be their slave. And you know, in that process, sometimes women do not teach their children to respect them. They may respect the male, but they don't seem to always respect the female. And sometimes the men don't respect the women. So my father didn't respect anybody. And but he was like I said, a 6'4" Boris Karloff, very violent, very hateful. And my mother just thought he was, you know, hot. And that's, you know, he was not good for babies. And we need to start picking men and women based on good for babies, because he was not a good candidate. And even in the home, I thought my mother, since she had so many sisters and all this, I always thought, you know, I was very pro-female. So they weren't. They didn't think, they thought strong women were horrible. Because my grandfather's mother was very strong in the 1880s, 1890s. She had 2 children. She decided she wanted a divorce. She sent her husband packing with his fiddle. She took the 2 children on her own, created 2 businesses, became wealthy. Now, we're talking 1890s. And they hated her because they thought she was too butch. She was a butch female. And they just hated that. And she got a divorce. So in my mother's family, if you got divorced, you were the lowest denominator there was. You were a horrible woman if you got divorced, no matter what the man did. So my mother, and they had no option to get divorced. The one daughter who did, the sister they had that did divorce, they just treated her like a harlot. And she was a very strong-minded woman. She became a nurse in the 20s, 30s, was an incredible nurse. But, you know, eventually she got married and had to give all that up and be the doting wife. And then she resented her children, and the children never connected with her or her husband. And so they just... it was a sad, sad, sad story. You know, they all ended up dead and alcoholics and sad and mad, and it just was shocking. You know, so I got to see a lot of what the damage is that happens to women because of men. because the man she had to divorce, he was stepping out on her. He was doing other things. He was abusive. And she had to divorce him at that time. But they looked down on her for divorcing him. They would always go, "You made your bed, now lie in it." That was something I always heard. But when we as a culture started doing things for women, started trying to run for president, my mother and her people just, it doesn't matter who the woman is, they hate her. So, and I see that in our country. There were women who ran other countries, pretty well. It wouldn't kill us to have a female president, but anyone who's doing it will get put through the ringer because they're scared of having a strong feminine energy in charge. And it doesn't matter who it is. Whoever runs for president in that position, they're going to get toasted. And that comes from our very hard-rooted, dominant women are bad. Why? Because they make the man look like he's not doing his job. Maybe they make him look like he has a small pee-pee. Who knows what it is? But they can't handle it. They would put anyone in charge as long as it's not a woman. And we haven't seen what would happen if we did have a female. Maybe we might have some nurturing going on. Maybe we might have somebody who says, we're not treating our children right. These guys are bad for babies. Get rid of them. We need to try it at some point. I think we will at some point, but they act like in Christianity, the people I know think it's the end of the world. If a woman gets in charge or a gay person gets in charge, oh my Lord. Gay people, the only big thing ever gay people did, and I'm speaking as one, is Stonewall. And into the 80s and 90s when AIDS hit, they were a lot of protesting and stuff, but, they really aren't known for being very violent to get across what they want to. So, they're still in the same bucket the women are, which is, because you're a gay person, you have no worth and you shouldn't have rights and you shouldn't have what everyone else. So let me straighten that out a little bit. And for the women too, if you are born in this country, whether you're paying your taxes or not paying your taxes, you're born in this country. You should have the same rights as everyone else, period. I don't think that, I don't like male and female marriages. For me, it's not my way. I'm a ham-faster. But if that's what people want, they have the right to have that. There is a separation of state and church in this country, should have been. And it shouldn't matter to you who these people are, because what? They're gay, so what? What are they going to do? You don't hear awful things going on in that department. Most gay people I know are boring. I am a gay, boring person. When I was young and they were going, oh, those gay people, oh, they acted like gay people were having orgies all the time and having basically had like a discotheque in their house or something. And I thought, really? So when I got old enough, I thought, which line do I stand in for that? And there was no line. Most gay people are boring. They're boring. And they have their life. They do their laundry. They do go to work. And nowadays, most of them are interested in having families. And that's one of the big parts in the church, the reason that they have such a thing about gay people is because gay people weren't producing children and followers. So they used us as scapegoats, just like they use women as scapegoats. Now, in the matriarchal times, which there were, there'll be a lot of people tell you, well, there's no proof of it. Well, it's getting eradicated. So you're very rarely going to find out how strong the matriarchal was, but it was there. When the men came in and wanted to go with a new god, eventually now it's the god, that they have out. But before then, it was multiple gods. But when the men wanted to take over from the matriarchal societies where the women had they were priestesses and stood up and did that, they would just take them out and kill them. When countries wanted to take over and replace the religion, replace the pagans, replace whatever, they would go in and kill the ones that stood in their way. And then the ones that were left would go along and say, oh, yeah, I'll do that, and followed it. Or, you would get burned or hanged or whatever. And Christianity, of all things, used to do gay marriages. Now, from the 8th to the 18th century, I believe, is what I remember looking at. They used to have gay marriages because they were coming from Christianity in in Roman times. The Greeks and the Romans had a lot of gay issues going on, a lot of gay stuff. And so they accepted gay people to a point. And so Christians actually were, in their first part of it, they were accepting gay people. And they were giving them marriages and they were okay. And there were actually 2 gay guys that were gays, but they were Christians. They were pushing Christianity, and they were executed. And then they became saints, and there were a lot more. There was a cult of men in Greece that, they if they wanted to become a woman, like trans, they would castrate themselves and become women. That was as close as they could do it. There was an army of like 300 gay soldiers. It was so much more prevalent. And up to about 390, Christians were doing the thing, giving marriages, accepting gays. Then at some point, it turned, and they and the Romans began to make homosexuality illegal. And they started killing them, burning them, hanging them. Then, I was listening. What triggered all of this? I was listening to a politician a couple of weeks ago, and very not so good speech. And he was downing trans people. And he went, well, your ancestors didn't come over on a boat, which pissed me off. Okay, so our ancestors may have not come on a boat the way some other people did, but let me tell you what they were doing to gay people. They would, when they became illegal, they would take men and castrate them and make them eunuchs and make them slaves. The Indian, Chinese, Egyptian, Greek, and Romans sometimes would accommodate, but then they got to where they would enslave them or kill them. After accepting them for so long, then all of a sudden they became the scapegoats. And anything that was feminine-based, if it was a feminine gay man, he was in trouble. He would either be killed, or sold into slavery. And, there are some countries, India believes in the third nature or sex. There are some, I think it's like 150, like American Indian groups. They have like a twin spirit belief, that they believe the person has two souls, so they're male and female, and sometimes they accommodate them, and they would just treat them as transgender. And I just remembered it. Sergius and Bacchus is the two Christians who were executed who became saints. And from that early time, people started, in Islam, they started stoning and burning, collapsing walls on gay people. They did, Sharia law, which they're doing now. They tie gay people to chairs and drop them off buildings. Just horrible, 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 horrible things, but it's because they have the feminine. They are afraid of these people. They're afraid of gay people. And we had the Inquisitions, which would kill the gays. And even when we started this country, in 1778, Thomas Jefferson wrote a law. Instead of hanging gay people, why don't we just castrate them? And that didn't get passed, so they were still hanging us. We were still illegal up until the 60s. I remember it being illegal. I knew someone who got arrested just because they were effeminate. And people just suspected they were gay. And, you would, if they saw you out walking down the street, you could be arrested. It was crazy. And if you were a drag queen or anything like that, police, and still there's a law in Chattanooga. If you're arrested as a drag queen, you have to have a piece of male clothing on or you're in trouble. You get arrested. And maybe, again, we may not have come over on the boats that the politicians' ancestors did, but we came. We've known slavery. We've known torture. I'm going to have to go to break, but we'll be back in a minute. So all of you out there in the dark, don't touch that dial.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Paratalk Radio is your one-stop for all things paranormal, the unknown, and the supernatural. Join us every Monday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central for discussions and guests on topics such as ghosts, hauntings, Bigfoot, UFOs, and more. This broadcast is rated M for mature and intended for listeners over 16 on paratalkradio.com.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... nope.
That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
The time is 23 minutes after the hour.
Welcome back to Universal Truths with Mark Fultz, coming to you from WBHM-DB in beautiful Birmingham, Alabama. And what I'm squawking about tonight is about the masculine fear of the feminine. And I'm going through trying to get in from the perspective of what I remember being raised in and the culture I was raised in, which was incredibly stifling and terrible for women, terrible for gays, terrible for trans people, terrible if you were gay, lesbian, trans, bisexual, queer, whatever you want to be, whoever you are. It was just a stifling place to live. And now I live in Pensacola, and you just see so many people just living their lives. And they don't seem to the younger kids. There's a group of the younger kids that are a lot more open-minded, but not all kids are, because a lot of kids right now there's a return to the white supremacist way of life. So we're going to see a lot of kids who are going, "Oh, you should be gay," kind of thing. Or boys will be boys. I love that. I've known so many people from where I came from. I've known at least 5 or 6 gay people who have been murdered. And the thing that always gets me, if you go to their trials or anything, trying to get the murderer caught, their excuse is basically, well, boys will be boys. And that's a lot of horse manure as well. We need to start raising our boys not to be, if they're secure with themselves, they're not going to be insecure about women or gay people or trans people or anything. We're not raising secure men. And because a lot of men have homosexual tendencies, then they are drawn to it, but then they want to punish the gay person because, I want to beat you up because I'm attracted to you. I have seen that. And terrible stuff. But I was going to go ahead and go back to a little bit of, we were talking about here in America. Thomas Jefferson was wanting to pass a law to castrate men, gay men, instead of hanging them. So instead of that, they just kept hanging them. And we were illegal in this country. They still act like we're illegal. But let me tell you what, I'm an American citizen. I should have the rights as everyone else. I work, I pay my taxes. I can go and be on jury duty. I deserve the same respect and rights that everyone else does. Women deserve the same rights as everyone else does. And if they're doing the damn job that other people are doing, they need to be paid the same money. And if the Congress and Supreme Court were, they could just, write in, equal pay. Why hasn't that happened? Because they don't want the women to be on the same level as the male. Now, going back to when I was talking about the politician who thought, didn't understand, hadn't done their history to understand that other people have been slaves. Now, gay people are not the only people, black people, gay people are not the only people who have been slaves. There were the Irish, they were the Native American. If they didn't kill them, they made them slaves. There have been, and right now, as we're sitting here, now, really, think about this. They estimate there are 40 million people in slavery right now. And most of us people are women, children, and minority. And the minority gay, the minority everything. And because of the drug trafficking, people just sell people. They don't care. They kidnap them, don't care what happens to them, and sell them. 40 million people right now, as we're listening, are at least endangered, enslaved, and sex trafficking. And so many children are killing themselves because, when a few years ago, I think when we have come a long way for gay and transgender people. It's everywhere, in the arts. But really, when kids were growing up with the Glee concept, where I can come out and I can do this. Well, I don't really suggest that in school because bullies just look for that. I'm like, get through school, then live your life, Get through this, because when you involve hateful children they're having a horrible life, they're going to just turn around and give it to you. And there are so many gay children and transgender children and just children in general who are not protected. And I was one of those. I mean, people would, if I'd been alive as a child at the time when this internet stuff is on, they would have been telling me to kill myself. They tell kids to kill themselves. They bully them. The school doesn't want to get involved, but their school, you have to send your kids to school or you go to jail. So the school doesn't want to be responsible for any of it, but they are the vessel that these children are being abused in. And there are children killing themselves because no one is stepping in and saying, stop this. Like I said, if I had a child in school and somebody bothered my child like they do, I would unhinge my jaws and swallow them whole. They would hate to see me coming. I would sue them and make them pay for my child to get private tutoring. I would take them out of the school system as it is. But every week there's something horrible happening to some child. And two, not too far before us, because in the 60s, like I said, I'm going to go back to the 40s. Because right before the 40s, there was a little, like in Germany and everything, there was a big freedom going on, kind of like now. I mean, we do have you have more freedoms now, but there were gay bars, there were people living their lives the way they wanted to, because it really is not a choice. When you have people being born hermaphrodites and everything that proves right there that the sex, your body can be different than what the spirit is in there. And I see why people want to align and correct those issues. But sometimes they don't have a choice. They have to do it. It's not a choice. And they can't pray away it. That's just you trying to say lie and be lie to make us feel better. I know churches that have married men who are gay to lesbian women and made them get married to falsely act like they're straight. If you're in a religion that tells you you're awful and terrible, but give me your money, go find God in the sky. Go find God in a happiness. Go find your God or goddess in a happy life. Don't be going to these churches where they're telling you you're terrible or that your children should be worthless because they're not. We don't accept them. How Christian is that? God is supposed to be loving, not a hateful thing. And most of it is a cult of hate. And we're seeing a result of that. But 20 or so years right before I was born, I was born in 1962, so 20 years before I was born, the war was going on. The Germans in the concentration camps, okay? 15,000 at least gay people were killed in the concentration camps. There were gay people who survived the concentration camps. The armies came in and freed all the people in the concentration camps. But guess what? They considered gay people illegal. So while everyone else was being released from the hellholes, they put the gay people into prison. So it was freedom for some. And we got some of our rights in the 60s, but I think for the gay people, trans people, lesbian people, it's a struggle all the time. And like I said, when I was young and they were going, gay people are just having a party all the time. They resented thinking that gay people were having all this sex, having all these parties. And there's a small percentage of people who do live that way. That's like a stereotype of a straight person. There's just a little bit of them that live that way. Just a small percentage. And those are the ones they always zone in on, that are wild or crazy or do something. 98% of gay people are boring as hell. And most of us just want to live our lives, have our house, have our animals, have our flowers, find peace, find someone to love. And some people want to have families. Now, how the hell is that threatening to anyone else in the universe? How is it? It shouldn't be. That's because you're not secure, or you wouldn't be threatened by that. A person getting a sex change isn't going to change your life. A person marrying their gay partner and setting up house, that's not going to hurt you. But they're the feminine. They have to be punished. And that's the way it is. Now, in my era, most people would go, when I was young, the only places gay people could really gather, there are some gay churches, but believe me, that's a whole other trip, and bars. And so they would go to bars to see other gay people. I went to the bar and I started doing charity work. I raised money for people living with AIDS. So my going to the bar was different than what I always thought it was supposed to be. I would go and work and raise money for people, and the money went to babies and everybody, straight, gay, whatever, whoever had AIDS. And all of my friends that worked with me, we went and worked our tails off to raise money for those people. And it was a sad, sad time when it was at its peak. Because, you would just go in and you would see people you would love. You would just love to talk to them and meet them. And the next week they'd come in and say, someone would come in and say, oh, well, Bob died or Pete died or, died. it was just like people evaporated. And I knew someone who took care of men with AIDS, because at the time it was still, people were afraid to get around them, afraid to go see them, afraid for whatever. And, it was when Liz Taylor and Debbie Reynolds were raising awareness and trying to fight the stigmas. And on our own thing, I knew someone who took care of these men dying from AIDS. They had like a hospice house for them. And these men dying, they would become like children, and they would be crying for their mothers. And their mothers wouldn't come to sit by their children to let them die, with them sitting there wanting their mothers, calling for their mothers, crying for their mothers. And the women wouldn't do it. And then at the funeral home, they'd show up and scream and cry. Well, that's not when your child needed you. But because they were Christian or other beliefs, they scraped their child off. I know someone that he was engaged, because in my era, you had to try to be straight. I had to be straight. I was in 2 long-term relationships until I decided I'm not lying to anybody, and I'm not lying to myself either. I'm not going to ruin my life or their lives. But this one boy, who was very nice, very sweet, he was engaged, but he told the girl why, and he broke it off. She went to his mother and told him he was gay. So the mother called him and said, "You have to come home now. It's an emergency." He drove 2 hours nonstop, flying, thinking it was a real emergency. Got there, goes, "What is it?" And she handed him a torn up piece of paper. He said, "What's this?" And she said, "That's your birth certificate. You're no longer my son." We treat people like that. I know people like that all the time, treated like that. Do you want to treat your children like that? Do you want your children to grow up and treat their children like that? To me, that's a failure as a family, as a parent, to do that. We can't be doing people that way, but they do, because of the feminine. And we have to accept people as people. Now, a lot of these churches will turn around and start accepting gay people now that they're able to start having families. That means they'll be able to produce followers. So you'll start seeing the Catholics going, "Well, maybe we can squeeze you in here somewhere." But, we're going to always have people trying to take our rights away. We're always going to have people acting like we're demons or something. But gay people and trans, they just want to live their lives. They're just people. We all come from the same place. We all go to the same place. So think about your child. Do you really want to treat your child like that? Make them feel like if you aren't if you're something I'm scared of, I'm going to abandon you. But you brought them into the world. When you brought them into the world, you need to take care of them. You need to accept them as people. They aren't supposed to turn out to be you. They're supposed to turn out to be who they are. And you're supposed to love them. You're supposed to protect them. You're supposed to protect your wife. You're supposed to protect your children. The men have to learn how to not be afraid of someone different. They don't have to be afraid of the woman. They don't have to be afraid of the feminine. They need to be men. The women need to be women. And let me tell you what, as a gay person, my parents did me horrible things to me and thought it would make me tough. I am a tough person. If you bothered me now like some of these people would, I would chase you down the street with a stick and give you a couple knots on your head so I could read them later. I'm not anyone's victim. But we need to quit being victims. We need to be proactive. We need to treat and learn to teach men to be fathers and lovers and parents. We need to learn to teach women, do not degrade yourself. Hold yourself up. And your children are not pet rocks. They are little spirits in a container that you brought into this world. You cannot abandon them because your church says something about them. These are your children. So we're going to have to go to a break. So all of you out there in the dark, don't touch that dial, and we'll be right back.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... Nope.
That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experienced Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Welcome back to Universal Truths with Mark Fultz, coming to you from WBHM-DB. And I'm talking to you, I'm trying to cover, it's really a very hard subject. And hopefully I'm doing some justice to it. There's so much that I want to say sometimes that I have to make sure I get it all out because there's just too much. But coming back into this, the masculine fear of the feminine, which women, gays, lesbian, trans, bi, queer. There was something I did forget to say that I am going to have to say, because a lot of people go, it's like a little urban legend, but it's not. And I've known this over 40 or 50 years. In Europe, when they were burning gay people and burning witches, because what they would do to get rid of women, all they had to do once Christianity said, burn witches, which that's mistranslated from what I was trained when I was younger. It wasn't suffer not a witch to live. It was suffer not a poisoner to live, because poisoners were real. Witches were the fantasy. People would blame spoiled milk on a witch. It's like, come on, guys. But a poisoner, if you were a king, these poisoners, they had tasters. So because people would poison their food, people could poison their gloves, people could poison their clothing, their fans, their shoes, you put on the clothes and it would activate and you would die. They would get it in the food and the drink. Those were really dangerous. So suffer not a poisoner to live. But they went, well, we'll just change it to witch. That way, when they went into towns to take over, when the men wanted to be the doctors, the women were healers. There were healers and midwives, and they would use teas and poultices and rest and food to heal people. So the males came in, killed all those women, said, those are witches, let's burn them and make their children watch them. And so they could change, get rid of the women. And also if the women were like, worshiping female deities, whatever, they just went in, replaced them with their male deities because there weren't no women left. But it was an entertainment to burn people. So sometimes in Europe, when they were going to burn, sometimes they burned towns full of witches, of women that weren't witches. And it was a way to get rid of the women or to scare people. But they would, to entertain the crowds coming to watch, to burn the women, they would entertain them by burning homosexuals first. It would be a warm up the show. We're going to burn the gays. And in England and Europe, a faggot was a burning stick. And then later it became a cigarette or a flaming, but it's a flaming stick. So they would say, throw another faggot on the fire. So in modern era, when I was young, I got faggot a lot. Faggot goes back to burning men and burning gays. And so if someone called you a faggot, it was kind of that reference from that. And also I think that's where flaming queen comes from, because when I was young, people would, if they were a flamer, but it comes from the killing of gay people and burning them alive or garroting them, which is like strangling them or quartering them or doing any horrifying thing they could. And then made it so taboo. But then the people who were doing this behind the scenes, that's what they were doing because it was a forbidden fruit. And I mean, it's the way it is. In some religions, they're hiding all these sexual predators, And two, I will separate. Gay people are different than the pedophile. The pedophile is a different creature all its own. We don't understand pedophiles. I was molested at 8 by a family pedophile that the family protected. And they always thought that when molested children, that it was a victimless crime. They thought children were the tempters and the poor pedophile was the male or whoever. They were poor, pitiful little things. The children were the tempters. And I was raised around that. And when I was molested at 8 and tried to explain it to my mother, they held that against me. I was molested. And it was not something I wanted. It's not something I do. But a lot of people lump gay people and pedophiles together. Pedophiles are a different creature. I don't know any gay people that I'm friends with that are anywhere in that department. I don't like people going, well, it's bull. That is a different creature, and we don't understand them. And we need to, as a culture, understand them. Because if you go to look at sexual predators or anything on a map around where you live, it's just huge amounts of sexual predators. So we don't understand a lot about this. And I can tell you 98% gay people are turned off by that and are protecting children because they were unprotected children. And we need to start addressing some of those issues. But we can't because we are still fighting for the rights, human rights. The women are still fighting for human rights. And there are so many people that are having babies that don't want these babies. There has to be something. If people get insulted if I tell them, why don't you go get a vasectomy? Why don't you go get your tubes tied? They don't want to do that, but then they don't practice safe sex, and then they have these children they cannot take care of. And as an unwanted child, I know what that's like. It's horrifying. And we need to be a little bit more realistic on what we do. I don't, the thing with getting an abortion. I don't like abortion being used as birth control, but I do believe it has to be something that someone has an option for, because if they aren't ready to bring a baby in and they're going to resent that baby and that baby's being brought in, there's so many children being killed by people, good upstanding citizens, because they just aren't prepared for anything. So, it has to be, I think that's something that's part of our rights. It's just, it's not something I'm that thrilled with, but it's also something that I feel like we have to have. It has to be a right. And so many women are being forced to being single mothers and single parents, and we have to start training people how to be parents. And so we need to think about these things. The people who are just going, well, let's do away with this, that means people go back to the old days of dying from bad abortions, getting abortions wherever they can. So we have to make it reasonable. And in metaphysics, I'm in the spirit of two babies that did not make it, that were unwanted, that did not make it. And I made it in this life. I think if the spirit is that close to being connected, if it doesn't make it in that body, it will make a return. So we have to just think out of the box and quit playing the cult of the Republican and the cult of the Democrat, because they're cults. We have to be reasonable, think of people, think of health, think about protecting the children we do have, and start training people to quit being afraid of the feminine, quit mistreating women, respect themselves, and respect their children that they brought into this world. Now, we're getting close to the end of the show. I hope that out there somebody got something they needed to from this. I felt like this is an important issue, and I'm hoping that I got it across. But anyone that wants to contact me in person, I go to Live and Let Live store, metaphysical store on 4622 Softly Field Road in Pensacola. If you want to see me, call in there beforehand. Make sure I'm there. Sal Gandolfo, who owns the store, and Matt Ferguson, his apprentice, they are so good at helping with metaphysical issues. There are two other readers there, that Tony Talley and Terry O'Connor and myself, and we're all 60 years old. And so all three of us, we have a different perspective. Each one of us daily, we help people with these issues. I help people with these issues. I send people to doctors all the time to help with mental suffering, chemical imbalance, we look at people and we talk to them and do readings, but we also are realistic on trying to get people to help. And it's a very sad state that a lot of adults are in because they had sorry childhoods, parents who didn't know how to raise them, parents who were very limited in their access, and they were kids raising kids. We need to be more adult. We need to figure out and be realistic. And you can have your religions and your spiritual path, but try to be a little bit more understanding and kind. These people, each person is a spirit. They have a journey. Each child you have has a journey, has a purpose. So treat them as special and treat yourself as special. And if you try to pick a partner who's going to lift you up and not put you down. And from my metaphysical standpoint, in metaphysics, we love the feminine as well as the masculine, and we have the polarity in each of us. So find the male and the female in yourself. If you're scared of the feminine, you need to become more secure in yourself. You need to find out why you have that. And if you have the desire to put people down or scare your children or beat your children or abuse, get help. And if you cannot handle your children and you find help. There's people who will help you with your children. There will be people who will graciously help with children. And I'm going to end the show by saying thank you for listening. And I hope I helped someone out there in the dark listening to my show. And I'm very grateful to be able to come on the show and talk to you. So I want to tell everyone, love yourselves, love those around you, find the God and Goddess within yourself, and enjoy life. That's what it's for. Be kind. Good night to all of you.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.